This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 68.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba. For our wedding, Ramsey made his entrance on a kid's scooter that he borrowed from his manager. Hope you enjoy the show.
What's up, SE Nation? My name is Ramsey Majaba, host of this show, and if you've never heard of me, don't worry, you're not the only one. But as a brief intro, I'm a sales engineer out of Ottawa, Canada, and I do this website, We the Sales Engineers, and the podcast to help as many SEs or aspiring SEs learn and grow together. Thank you for being here. I hope you're enjoying the show and the shows that I've done in the past. I have 67 of them, so check them out if you haven't heard those ones yet. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I do have a free email course that helps those of us who are confused about our careers to plan out our career. The biggest problem I see is that most people I know let their career happen to them. But if you want to take control, check out wetheSalesEngineers.com/career builder. Now, you will have to sign up to receive to the newsletter and you will receive emails in order to get the emails, obviously. I try to provide useful emails only, but if you hate getting emails, you can always unsubscribe after you do the exercises that are in the career builder. So check it out. I never want to keep people against their will in my email list. I'd rather people who are active in the community and active on the website. So by all means, check it out. Now, for today's show, my guest needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyways. My guest is Peter Cohan, and he's the author of the book Great Demo. He's back. He's been on the show a couple of times. Let me double check here because I think I'm going to get them incorrectly. Show 54 and show 49. He's also been on my YouTube channel, so you have a lot of things to check out with Peter. And if you don't know Peter, you should. He owns the company called Great Demo, where he helps companies, organizations, and individuals improve their demo skills. And he wanted to come back and talk about the perfect demo environment. Before we get started, Peter asked me to give you a surprise, but we're going to keep that in close to the chest, and we're going to talk about it during the outro, so that means you're going to have to stay tuned all the way. You didn't see that one coming. Well, enough dilly-dally. Here we go. I know you wanted to talk about something specific, which is the perfect environment of demoing. I think I butchered it, but is that correct?
No, you got it. The perfect demo environment, exactly.
The perfect demo environment. So what brought this on?
What brought this on? Several things. One is it's been brewing for quite a while. In many of the nearly all the Great Demo workshops that we do, we always see people who will fumble with their software. They say, "Oh, that's not working. Gee, no, I don't have that report. Gee, I'm having performance issues," and so forth. And began to realize that although it's a topic that we rarely address in the workshops directly, it's a topic that represents, if you will, a set of both skills and maybe checklists and know-how. I can give you some examples of what I've heard when I'm watching demos or preparation demos that customers have sent me, where they have been presenting to their customers, and there are comments such as the following. So things like where you hear the vendor say something like, "Sorry, I don't have an example like that in our demo system." And you can almost hear the customer thinking, maybe we'll need to run a POC, because if they don't have a good example, how do I know this is going to work? Similarly, you'll hear things like, "No, we can't show that workflow." And then you'll hear the vendor say something like, "Well, this is a demo database." And the customer is thinking, "Uh-oh, we better do a POC." I've also heard things like, "Our demo environment isn't up to date, and that's why this feature isn't working," which causes the customer to really begin to wonder what's going on. I've also heard things like, "No, I don't have good data to show in this report. In fact, it's empty. I have no data at all. Sorry." And the customer's thinking, oh, that's problematic. That's exactly what I wanted to see in this demo. How do I know this is really going to work in our hands? And I just heard recently, and I think this may have been the one that precipitated me wanting to do this segment, if you will. I actually heard a vendor say, well, that report hasn't been built for our demo system, but trust me, it's terrific.
Yes.
I actually heard that phrase. And
okay.
Go ahead.
Well, no, it's just funny when like someone like us says, trust me, it works, usually means that either I don't know how to do it or it doesn't work.
Exactly. And to be fair, there will be situations where it should work, it could work, it can work, but there's no proof because the demo environment lacks the report, the data, the relevance or whatsoever to complete that connection with the customer. And so that's why we really started to put together this segment.
Okay, well that's great. I'm happy to report that I've never been in that situation, whether it's myself or a teammate of mine.
Well, you are delightfully unusual. If we had one graphic that we were going to use for this session, you'll just have to imagine it. But visualize somebody who is presenting a demo either before, during, or after the demo, yelling and screaming and cursing at his or her laptop, because that's pretty much the sum of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So how do you want to do this? There are three areas that I've identified that we could talk about. There's the physical environment, the software environment, and then not surprisingly, there's also a human environment. We could launch into those linearly, or you could just go ahead and guide the conversation as you wish.
Well, I wanted to ask before we get there, why do we get into these situations where we don't have the information that the customer needs, or we can't show certain areas? Like if someone does this discovery properly, I can't imagine them going into a meeting not having that information prepared. Like, why would someone get into that situation?
Well, it's not necessarily a fault issue directly. I'll give you some sort of broad examples and then a couple of specific examples. The broad examples might be such as there's been a demo environment built, or there is a demo environment that is in place that has terrific data for the banking and finance industry. But you, as a vendor, have an opportunity here to sell into the pharmaceutical space. Well, the data is not relevant for pharma, even though all the functions and features all should work properly. The audience sees the data and says, well, that's not my data. That's it looks like the banking industry. So it's just too far from what we do. Now, is there a fault at hand there? Maybe. You could say that whoever's put together that demo environment could or should have contemplated a range of different verticals and marketplaces, but typically speaking, that's extremely, well, that can be very challenging to do. But that would be if you will, a pseudo no-fault example. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and then there are other examples. And this sort of leads to many of the ideas that I wanted to share in this session. One of the things that I learned sort of the hard way, I was working for a U.S.-based company based in California, and then for a period of 2 years, I was, as I love to say it, banished overseas to Switzerland to join our Swiss office, which was supporting sales and marketing and deployment in Europe and the UK. Well, that's all one thing. And suddenly realized that all the examples, all the data that were in all of our databases and our applications and so forth were, guess what? What do you think?
I'm drawing a blank right now.
It was all US based. So US cities, US zip codes, US telephone numbers, US addresses, even US names, US units. So when you're trying to suddenly find you're selling in Europe, where the country codes are significant, the postal codes don't look anything like a zip code. There's this unit called a kilometer, which doesn't really match up very well with a mile, and on and on. It made it very, very challenging to resonate with European audiences. So that was a living example, and even a simple one. the U.S. believes, amusingly enough, that there's only one type of paper in the world in many cases, which is, of course, our units of 8.5 by 11. And if you've ever drafted marketing materials for 8.5 by 11 and you've done a careful job and it fits beautifully, you send that over to your colleagues in Europe, what happens?
Doesn't fit.
It doesn't fit because the A4 paper is ever so slightly longer and ever so slightly thinner, and what mapped perfectly no longer maps. And the same thing is true for any demos and reports. We began to see, as I was demonstrating some of these things, I began to find that the reports that have been set up that were beautiful in our US-based systems suddenly didn't quite map well when we were using European environments and mapping for European paper and printers and so forth. So these are things that, well, even where the, if you will, the demo environment itself may have been whole, some of the subtleties of mapping to other environments were not being taken care of. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. All right, let's get started with then the perfect demo environment. Starting with the way you listed them, which was the physical, and if I have any questions, I'll interrupt.
Okay, so physical environment, we could take a look at two angles here. One is physical environment for face-to-face demos and physical environment for over-the-web demos. And one of the things I like to suggest is the use of checklists. And an example I love to use are airplane pilots or airplane crew members, and they always use checklists. And well, I'll ask you, why do they use checklists? Even though they've been flying those airplanes for thousands of hours and they have lots and lots of experience, why do they still use a paper or electronic checklist?
It's a system, in my opinion.
And so they don't what?
So they don't forget anything in a rush.
Exactly. Yeah, so they don't forget anything because there's interruptions, there's things that change all the time and so forth. And my claim would be, why would a preparation for any substantial or important demo be any different? And so be happy to share with you at least a starter checklist. You probably should build your own for both of these sets of environments. So, you know, from the standpoint of the simple things, your physical environment, you've got a laptop, you've got your internet access and connectivity, you've got projector connectivity, projector resolution, other equipment you might have, giveaways or anything else you're bringing with you. But let's go back a half a step. Do you carry your own projector, or do you use a customer's when you go face to face for demos?
I always use customer projectors. I know other salespeople carry their own projectors, but I know all of my customers have projectors in their offices.
And have you ever been surprised when you connected to one of your customers' projectors and found that the resolution was, let's just say, suboptimal?
On a consistent basis.
And what happens? What do you see? And then how do you deal with it?
Well, they either bring in another projector from the admin. Keep in mind, I work with very big network element manufacturers, so they have that sort of thing. Or we just suffer the consequences of having a funny-looking screen.
Exactly, and in many cases, people will find, the vendor finds, oh, I can't get to the OK button, or gee, there's sliders here that I've never seen before, so they're confused. The software's not rendering well. And when you think about it, the demo is the first and one of the least expensive forms of proof, and to have this kind of surprise is really a huge negative in terms of presenting your offerings in the best possible light. Pardon the pun there with the projector. The guidelines here then are very simple. One is either know what you're dealing with ahead of time and characterize it, which can be difficult if you're always relying on the customer's projectors. Or very frankly, what I recommend, if you're doing lots of face-to-face meetings, go out and invest that $400 or $500 in a projector that is high-res, that's well-characterized, and is consistent so that each time you plug in, there's no surprises and your software is being presented and rendered literally in the best possible light. So that's something a lot of people don't think about. They just live with the fact that they're constantly surprised when they plug into customers' projectors. I have to say, it's interesting to note that whereas most hardware technologies seem to evolve fairly steadily, what you often see in customer meeting rooms are projectors that are still running at 1024 by 768 pixels. And that's pretty bad when you bring a high-res Windows box or Macintosh laptop to those meeting rooms. So comments or questions on that?
No, I agree with you in terms of it's the least of our customers' concern to update the projectors to fit our needs.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't care.
No, like if you go to where they do their presentations to their customers, they have like top of the line projectors, the big screen TVs, and all that. But we're not allowed in there. So
exactly. Well, yeah, you're not allowed in there. So that can also happen. Have you ever had a situation where you went on site and if I recall correctly, you need to have network access in order to demo your software. Is that correct?
It's the best way to demo my software. Yes.
Have you ever had a situation where, for whatever reason, it was a government installation or for whatever reason, you could not get to the internet? You couldn't get outside using their network?
Yes, I've had that, which is why I have hotspot enabled on my phone in order to do that.
And that's exactly where I'm going. I cannot tell you how many times I've had a vendor report, well, we went to this customer site or a government installation and they wouldn't allow us to connect to the network. And in some cases, we've even heard situations where they couldn't get out on a personal Wi-Fi because it was in the basement or it was too far away or whatsoever. So this is another area that people are sometimes surprised. And I would hate to find that somebody has flown across the country for a major demo and found that there was no connectivity. So sort of 3 layers. Number 1, confirm whether or not you have access to the internet through the customer's environment. Number 2, as you do, bring a MiFi or your phone or something that can connect independently and at the same time confirm that that will work. Or number 3, you may need to have everything installed and able to run on your laptop without any connectivity from the outside. So that's sort of a safety check plan, if you will.
Yes.
Yep. Thoughts on that? Or?
Well, for when you're going to do demos at government stations, even if they don't provide you internet and you're expecting to use your hotspot, a lot of like high security facilities will take your phone before you walk into a meeting room.
Exactly. So now you are internet free at that point.
Yeah. So again, I would say confirm that you're allowed to use your phone inside. If not, install. Like even I, who use hardware to demo my equipment, have virtual products that I can install on my laptop and go in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is a case of prepare for the worst, so that if the best happens, it's delightful, but you're ready if something is not available.
Yeah, or invite them to a conference room somewhere else, like a hotel. Yes.
That's a good idea. Invite them to, if you will, a neutral location, which could at least offer more consistent access.
Yep.
So let's change gears. Have you ever walked into a customer's conference room and found it was just a mess? And if so, what did you do?
I personally haven't, but I would imagine what I would do is, well, I have no idea. I'd ask for a different room or try to clean it up a little bit before doing this.
So that's exactly where I'm going. It's a strange thing, but even if you're at a customer's room, the customer perception, because you're holding this meeting, even if it's in their room, customers, I think, unconsciously will associate whatever that room looks like with you, the vendor. And so I make it a point to try to arrive on site quite a bit early, 20 to 30 minutes, get things set up, and then I will police that room. I will clean it up as best as I can. I'll remove coffee cups. I'll clear things off the table. I will, with permission, erase whiteboards if there's garbage on it, or at least clean it to the point that you can. Because it's subtle, but the surroundings are going to impact and reflect on the customer's perceptions of what you're doing. So organize, clean the room, and then along similar lines, and this could be a bit of a surprise, most of the time I will see a vendor come in and they'll sit on one side of the room and the customer sitting on the other side of the room. And I have a different recommendation. Any thoughts on this?
Well, true story. One point, our customer wanted us to sit like that. He's a little combative, which is why I assume he wanted to do that. But I always try to like interlace myself and my sales guy, and if anybody else is with us, between the customers.
Exactly. What I recommend is to try to intersperse people, vendor, customer, sort of the old boy, girl model, if you will. And the rationale is to break things up. I like to personally sit next to the highest ranking person. Any suggestions as to why I might want to do that?
Well, from what I've read, and this has not happened to me personally, but from what I've read, it like increases collaboration. Like you're no longer enemies sitting across from each other. You're sitting together and working towards a common goal.
Absolutely. That's definitely true. And I want to see what is he or she writing down, what notes are being taken, because that tells you what they're taking and what they're remembering. And from time to time, I may also want to lean over and provide some additional color or an additional thought. And it's much easier to do those two things when you're sitting side by side than if you're across the table. So that's something else to think about.
And are you, sorry, can you ask a question about that? Are you doing that as the person doing the demo, or are you there as like an observer?
Generally, in my case, I'm typically more the observer these days. But if I was doing the demo, and there was nobody else, I would still try to sit next to the most important person.
I usually try to get my sales guy to sit next to the most important person.
There you go, and that's kind of where we're going with this.
Okay.
You know, the traditional alignment of the vendor in that front left corner of the room next to the screen, and the rest of the vendor's team down along that same side of the table. There's no rationale behind that in terms of logic, other than it's momentum. We've been and we are victims of momentum. We've been doing this for the past 30 years. So contemplate breaking things up and changing things up a little bit. So that's face to face. Any other additional thoughts or comments about that?
Well, are we going to like through web demos right now?
Sure.
Well, then let me finish that first part with this story. Have you ever attended a meeting which is supposed to be face to face, and you notice there's only one person instead of the 10 that were promised?
Yes, all the time.
Okay, so I'm not the only one. Perfect.
Well, there's potentially several things. This is an interesting topic. Several things going on here. One of which could be that the meeting changed, or if you will, the operation changed, and that the 5 people were invited, or of the 5 people that were invited, only 2 or 3 showed up. And there's a self-rescue you can do with things like this, and that is a day or 2 before the demo meeting, just send a message to your key contact or your champion that effectively asks the questions. Just want to make sure that things are on track for our demo meeting coming up on Wednesday. Any changes in the participants, the timing, or objectives. If you send that email a day or 2 before the event, at least you've got the opportunity to learn whether or not there have been some changes, and you can prepare accordingly, or at least adjust accordingly. So that's one thing that you could do. There's a second scenario that I thought was the direction you were going, and that is that you've gone on site and you're meeting with a handful or one person, and there are other people from the customer side that are connecting over the web. Is that also something you have seen?
So that's where I was going, where people decide to attend a WebEx, although I never send a WebEx link before the meeting if I want them to attend face to face, but everyone expects that. So only one shows up to the meeting room, and the rest sit at their desk waiting for a WebEx link.
And which, so you need to then send that WebEx. Now here's a subtlety that a lot of people don't potentially think about. And let's just say that you've got 5 people in the physical meeting room, you're with them, and there's another 4 people that are connecting over the web, Zoom or WebEx or GoToMeeting or whatsoever. You are going to, here's a best practice. You need to deliver the entire engagement, computer-wise, if you will, through the confines of your laptop in Zoom or WebEx or whatsoever. Because the moment that you gesture or you go to the whiteboard or a flip chart or you use a prop or visual aid that's not in your software, unless you have a webcam on, and the webcam is directed to you, the folks who are outside of that meeting room cannot see you, and you will lose them. And it feels awkward and a little bit uncomfortable to operate strictly through the confines of the collaboration tool, but it is without question a best practice. So that's just something else to think about in terms of meeting prep.
What I've done to combat that, people not showing up to my meeting, is to send my contact an email a day before or a couple of days before, asking him how many people will be in the meeting room. I want to make sure I have enough coffee or donuts or whatever it is for everybody.
Oh, that's a good way to go.
As soon as there's food, people tend to show up.
We used to say that, chumming for customers.
Yep.
So let's talk briefly about the collaboration tools, so Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting. This is probably worth a separate podcast or maybe even a webinar of some kind. But a couple of things to think about. Of course, your laptop, you want to have things cleaned. You want to turn off your alerts. You need to make sure you've got good access to the internet. Comment on that. A lot of people that use voice over IP well, let me ask you, have you ever heard a demo where the presenter's voice kept cutting out periodically?
Yeah, all the time.
All the time. And do they know it?
Well, if it's my colleague doing it, I tell them in the middle of the demo that we're not hearing you properly. Please, can you switch to a phone?
Exactly.
If it's,
so they can't.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say that the presenter can't tell because they're talking. So this is something else to be aware of, that when you're trying to basically stream from your laptop and drive your voice over IP, you may have insufficient bandwidth from time to time. And it may not be, your laptop, it may not be your local environment, but it may be somewhere down the line, literally, that's causing a bandwidth problem. So you should test that out ahead of time, and you may want to contemplate GASP using a landline for those kinds of sessions, or at least a separate connection so that you're not trying to force everything through your laptop.
Yes, I always use my phone, except for these kind of interviews. But whenever I'm joining a call, phone is my go-to.
That makes sense. Should we talk briefly about video over the web? Is that something worth mentioning?
Yeah, for sure. I encourage people to turn on their webcams whenever they're doing demo.
I'll make the following suggestions. So first of all, video helps a lot. It humanizes you to the audience, to your customer. So you're not a disembodied voice, and by seeing a real live, warm-blooded human on the other end of a video, there's a tendency for the customer to beat you up less because now you are human. However, here's where things get a little bit more interesting. Humans can only look at one thing at a time. And if you have a pane on your laptop or their laptops, whatever, that is showing you and your video and your face, humans find it very difficult to look at the face and take in a screen of software that's being presented and moving below or to the left or right of that face. They can't do two things at once. So what I recommend is when you're doing introductions and going through the first portions of a demo, have the video on so that your customer can see and interact with you that way. But when you start the demo of the software, close or turn off video while you demo. When it's time for a summary or you want to take some questions, I recommend turning it back on again. It's a great way to indicate that you've completed a segment and it's an opportunity for them to engage and ask questions and so forth if they haven't been doing so all along. And then continue that process until you are ready for your summary. And again, for the summary, I recommend then turning on video as you summarize, take any final questions, discuss next steps, and so forth. So this is a skill that I believe should be practiced because people forget. They will either never turn on video at all, which is what we're doing today, or they'll turn it on and leave it on, which to a certain degree is second best, but is a far cry from what really is the best practice of turning it on, causatively turning it off, turning it back on, and so forth.
Nice. I didn't think of that. I always thought that. So I don't do web demos most of the time. Most of the time I'm on site. I have the luxury of being on site with my customers. But on occasion, we've done WebExes where I thought the customer can just minimize my the pane that has my face in it.
Right. But they want to see you, the handsome, shining face. Actually, along those lines, there's a couple of other thoughts to contemplate. And that has to do with lighting and your office. Do you work in a home office or in a office building?
Both. I have an office at my house, which is my main office, and whenever I'm outside the house, I'm at a customer site, and I visit the work office every once in a while.
Got it. So when you're sharing your screen and you're sharing your video, we need to be cognizant of what our surroundings look like, because they do impact customer perceptions and to a certain degree consumability. So, I've seen home offices that are just a mess. There's piles of stuff everywhere and so forth. That reflects negatively on the customer's perceptions of you as a vendor. So, sort of like the discussion about the conference room, clean it up, make it look crisp and clean, because that's going to impact their perceptions of you. Lighting is something that a lot of people don't think about. And for example, in my home office, I found that with the lights on in the room during the day, it actually looks worse than if I turn off the room lights and just let the natural light from the outside come in to illuminate my face and shoulders for the webcam. So this is something worth exploring and testing, is actually try different lighting conditions, see what you look like to your customer, see what's in that back wall so you're not surprised and they're not surprised. Effectively, take a note of your surroundings and the best way to present.
Yeah, you're not seeing me right now, but I'm looking around my room, and behind me is fairly clear. In front of me, it's fairly clear. But all the stuff that's piled up on the sides, were outside the range of the camera. It's just sad.
And hopefully it's out of range of the camera, right?
Yes, it is out of the range of the camera.
So perfectly acceptable. What they can't see, they don't know about. So that's fine.
But I feel like it affects. I'm not advocating someone cleans up the room or anything, but it does affect someone's psyche, looking at, getting distracted by all the stuff that's around them. So
absolutely, people will try to read what books you might have on the wall, on your bookcase, and so forth. They are distracted. Speaking of distractions, how many times have you ever heard somebody who was either connecting at home or delivering a demo from a home office, you hear a dog barking or a child crying? Oh, wait, you've had this happen.
Yes.
So I was, in fact, just a week and a half ago, I was watching one of my customers delivering a demo to one of their customers, and the vendor had what apparently turned out to be 2 big Bernese mountain dogs. These dogs must weigh 150 pounds. They're huge, and their barks sounded like something out of a science fiction movie, sort of this long woof sound, very loud, very deep. I thought it was funny as heck, but it was not really appropriate for a vendor to be to be presenting. So
okay,
go ahead.
It's the vendor, or I understood the customer had the Bernese dogs, but it's the vendor who
it was the vendor. It was my customer. The vendor had the Bernese. Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay.
And so this is another one of these things. You got to manage your environment. If the dogs need to be taken to another room and provided with some reading material and maybe an iPad or something to engage them or whatsoever,
yeah,
you need to do so. Similar challenges when you have young children. It's cute to have the 2-year-old come in and make some comments, but sometimes it's a little bit distracting. So these are things you just have to manage.
Yeah. What's more distracting is than yelling at that kid. I've been in a situation where a colleague of mine yelled at a kid, at his child, for interrupting his demo. I didn't know what to say for the next 5-10 minutes. I just ignored it.
It's flabbergasting, isn't it? It's very, very surprising.
Yeah.
So let's move on. That's a few comments about the physical environment. There's certainly more we could talk about, but that's probably sufficient for this session. Should we move on to the software environment, or
Yes, sir.
what's your pleasure?
Yeah, software sounds good.
Okay. So let's sort of start with perhaps I think one of the most important suggestions, and that is to treat your demo environment, or have your demo environment, the same as a customer environment. And the reason I'm saying this is far too often demo environments are half-baked, they are in process, they are sometimes development environments that are where changes are ongoing, and if you go the other direction and you effectively treat your demo environment as if it's another important customer, particularly for SaaS software, then it's going to receive the same treatment, the same update, procedures and processes that a customer environment would. You just are reducing the risk of challenges occurring. And so let me pause there and ask, does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And here's one that might be a little bit surprising. Don't call it demo. So this is non-obvious, but every time, even though the customer said, I want to have a demo, I want to organize a demo meeting, once you're in that meeting, if possible, try to avoid using the word demo. Do you know why?
No, this is new to me.
So demo translates to the word fake in a customer's mind. So if I say, well, this is our demo environment, what does that tell you? It's not real, or it's not the same as what a true customer environment would be. So every time the word demo either appears on the screen or is used by the vendor, you're basically telling the customer it's less and less real. So here's our demo environment. We've got a bunch of demo examples in here. There's demo customers in the demo database. The applications here say demo. The file names say demo. Every time you see that, the customer's thinking fake, 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 fake. And you're increasing the likelihood that they're going to say, well, since it is a demo environment and not reflective of a real environment, we probably need to ask for a, guess what?
POC.
Exactly. Comments or thoughts on that?
I never thought about it. So I don't have a SaaS, I have networking equipment. Generally speaking, I try to keep it named like the same naming convention that a customer would use.
Exactly. Yep.
But
and that is best practice.
I don't think I did it on purpose. I just happened to do it that way.
You are consistently way ahead of the curve, so this is a good thing. Along similar lines, have you ever seen vendors present demos where the environment has obviously fake names, like the names of actors and actresses, or famous sports figures, or comedians, or whatsoever? Have you ever seen that?
I've seen restaurants.
Restaurants?
Yeah,
okay.
a router named after IHOP, some other stuff, which I can't remember right now, but yeah.
And what is your impression of that? Or what does it make you think?
I thought I could use it as a joke. Like when I saw it, we joked about it in front of the customer and we moved on. I didn't think much of it. And
so you're doing, if you will, the right thing for the situation is to make a joke about it. However, it is yet again an indication that this is not what?
Professional.
Well, not a real environment.
Okay.
So, yeah, and so to a certain degree, you're hurting your cause with what are obviously fictional names, addresses, data of any kind. It can be amusing, but again, it's telling the customer this is not real, and you're pushing the customer to either go much deeper than they might need to go, or to drive towards a POC. Years ago, when I was setting up a demo environment, we had the opportunity with a new architecture to build a brand new environment. We were trying to find, well, what can we use to populate this environment? We had a database container, and we needed to fill it up. And what we ended up finding was that our QA and QC departments actually already had good, realistic data that they were using for their own QA and QC functions. And we ended up using the same tools, to generate realistic but unreal data that we then used in our demo environment. And there's a pile of tools out there. It might be worth taking a look and finding them. Don't have them off the top of my tongue, but they are out there that will either auto-generate, or I should say generate realistic data in accord with what kinds of fields you have, names, addresses, phone numbers, international, and so on. That's worth contemplating rather than having, so what, partly what drove this was recently I saw a demo from someone that had their demo environment had the names from all of the Ocean's series of movies, from the very first one all the way through whatever it is now, Ocean's 8 or whatsoever. So all the actors and actresses, and I think some of the producers and directors and so forth were in this database, and it just screamed fake.
Nice. So I do have a question. Like, if we go back to the start where we didn't even know if we had started this podcast or not,
Yes.
we talked about like going to do demos to a hospital or a medical field, but you had only banks while doing the demo. In my mind, like, whenever I have a situation, although it's not the same, I try to ask whoever I'm demoing for during my discovery, like if I can get their data so that I can use that in their demo.
So that is without question the best possible case, where it's easy to get their data and easy to put it into your system is the best possible case. For many folks software, getting other folks' data into one system actually begins part of an implementation process and may actually begin to be more of a POC than a demo. But without question, the closer the data in the environment is to what the customer is using, the less risk you are engaging, if you will.
Have you experienced any pushback from customers saying that they don't want to provide this information for a demo? I'm trying to understand why you said it's nobody's fault that we don't have that they don't have that information. I'm trying to understand why they don't. Why is that if they can't?
Well, in many cases, the customer data is confidential, and they either will not or in some cases cannot provide it to you. Pharma, banking, finance. These are all situations where it's basically a licensed breach if they're in many cases if they're providing you with that data, or it's not a license breach, but it's a scenario where they can't provide it to you because it's company confidential or it's privacy confidential, if you will. Okay. So there will definitely be situations where you as the vendor would love to have the customer's data, but they just can't or won't give it to you.
Okay. And at that point, you go and create your own data to look like that customer?
So yeah, and this represents a reasonable challenge for whoever is setting up and maintaining a demo environment. What it really suggests is that for each market or vertical that you want to embrace and engage, you need to have realistic looking data for each of those markets and verticals. So the examples that we were talking about previously, if you want to sell to hospitals, if you want to sell to healthcare, you want to sell to pharma, you want to sell to finance, you want to sell to banking, manufacturing, construction, each of those environments has different vocabulary, different data, different formats, and if you want to have your highest possibility of success, you really need to map to those requirements, if you will. Does that all make sense?
Yes, it does. I'm asking because I'm not in that industry, so I'm just trying to clear that up. But thank you for that information. Okay.
Along related lines, but a little bit different, I cannot tell you how many times I'll see demos that they'll show a dashboard, for example, and everything in the dashboard looks great. Everything's in the green, so to speak. Everything's running well and things look fine. That is insufficient. For a demo to be successful, you need to show how you are solving problems, you are surfacing exceptions, finding opportunities, analyzing the areas of concern or risk. So you need to build into a demo environment, or have, let's say, ready in your demo environment, all of those kinds of use cases that you want to be able to show or address with the software for the customer. So you need to be able to find problems with whatever is going on with their business. You need to be able to surface exceptions, uncover opportunities that could be exploited. And that means you really need to give some thought into how you set up that data. So let me pause there and ask, does that make sense?
It does. A lot of times demos are just showing the product, not showing what it can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a very good point.
So I recommend, if possible, to actually have two sets of states. One is the problem state, and the second would be the future or repaired, fixed, or addressed state, so that you can actually show both of those types of well, the before and after for a broad range of use cases. I saw this recently, and I just see it over and over again. There are a lot of companies that have systems that will track progress for some kind of workflows. And in many cases, what you'll see is well, I'll tell you what really precipitated this comment. I saw a task had been assigned to somebody, and the software tracks how long it's taken before that person has addressed the task, so they can use it to let managers say, hey, you're late on this task, you got to get to it, or so on and so forth. Well, the task had been set up and assigned to a person something like 5 years previously. I mean, it was 1,500 days that this had been overdue. So now, does that sound realistic?
It sounds like it's not very important, but no, it does not sound realistic at all.
I mean, the good news is that the software is continuing to track that this task had not been completed, but clearly it's out of bounds. And so something else to think about is you've got to keep it current, and you may need to reset or roll your system forward, if you will, with respect to dates and alerts and related. Because anything that looks ridiculous, a task that was set 5 years ago or even 3 months ago that hasn't been addressed, once again, is going to cause the customer to think, well, this is clearly not a real environment, and so maybe we need to run a POC, or we need to do a deeper check.
So I just a quick comment about that, or I don't know how quick. I was procrastinating the other day, and I saw a video on YouTube about Penn and Teller. I don't know, the big guy. He was commenting about magic in movies, and he commented about it has to be plausible. If something is a perfect perfect trick, no one will believe it, and people will start to doubt it. Yeah, so it's kind of what you're saying. If something is outside the realm of plausible, if you have something that's being tracked from 5 years ago that's not plausible, people will start to doubt what you're showing or why you're showing it. Is that what you were trying to say, or?
Yes, that's exactly what we're trying to say. In fact, one of the ways that I like to phrase this, in a demo, one of our jobs as the vendor is to suspend disbelief. We want to suspend disbelief. Anything that is obviously fake or not real hurts our cause. So, accuracy of data, relevance of timelines and alerts, market relevance, and on, all these things are important to enable the customer to suspend disbelief.
Have you ever had a situation where someone went into to do a demo and he had other customers' data in the database?
Bad. Yes, I have seen that. Yeah. Generally, I see it when somebody is saving a file or opening a file in many cases, and you see their directory structure, and in many cases you'll see that they have a directory structure that shows all these different customers that they were just selling to. Not only is the vendor at risk of violating confidentiality agreements at that point, but it's just unprofessional. So you need to make sure that you are sanitized and you're not sharing things that are that shouldn't be seen. And even worse, it sounds like what you were alluding to is that the data in the system actually was another customer's data. I have seen that happen as well, and that's just the category of very bad.
Yeah. Well, in my situation, it was just naming. Like they were putting the name of the customer in front of data which wasn't real, and they forgot to change it to whatever customer they're doing the demo for. So it wasn't actual data, but still, like we're going to do a demo for Cisco, and we had Nokia's name all over the place. So
that rates a rut-row.
yeah.
And actually, that suggests another strategy, and that is to use a tool like CloudShare or SkyTap or similar that, in theory, provide capabilities to reset a demo environment to its clean, virginal state, if you will. Are you familiar with any of those tools or used them?
I've heard of CloudShare. I haven't used it mainly because my lab environment is in my lab. So I don't know if it's useful for me. I haven't looked into it, to be honest.
So for the general public, I think it's well worth checking into these tools. In theory, they enable you to stand up a pristine demo environment where you know everything is done correctly, use it, and then effectively wipe it from the face of the earth and stand up a brand new copy of that same environment ready to go for your next demo. That way, you know that everything should be working, everything has been sanitized, all the old comments, the alerts, everything that was in the old environment has been refreshed, and you're not at risk. So that may be worth looking at. I believe VMware may offer an environment that way. I have not checked into it. I know of SkyTap and CloudShare that do. Be interesting to hear on other podcasts if people have any experiences with these environments that they might share.
I'll try to get someone from CloudShare to come and talk about it, and he can do a demo. Yeah. One thing they could do on top of like whether you use CloudShare or not is just add it to your checklist, naming convention, correct or not.
Absolutely. Yep. Along a related line, not too similar or dissimilar, I cannot tell you how many times I will see people start a demo by saying, I'm logging in as admin or administrator, or they just do it as admin and administrator. What does this tell the customer, do you think?
That it's a shared account or not secure, or anybody can do anything in the system.
Yeah, and is that reflective of a real environment?
No, everybody will have their own account.
Exactly. And so again, the best practice is, this says it's fake to the customer. And so best practice is to not do that. You could do that. You could actually do it through one of a couple ways. One is to enable an administrator level account, but don't call it admin. Just use a realistic looking name from which you can then drive everything you need to drive. Or alternatively, actually log in using and log out using the names or realistic names of people that would be in the various roles. So somebody who's an executive, somebody who's a middle manager, somebody who's a staffer, and potentially somebody who's an admin might all have different names and logins reflective of the environments they would actually see and use. So that's another, this is sort of a ease of demo side of things. It's so much easier for us to just log in as admin, but what you're telling the customer is, oh, hey, this isn't real.
Would it be a good idea to get the names of those who are attending and their roles and use their names in the demo?
That would be delightful. Be cautious. I would ask them for permission, but like using a logo from the customer. But I think that's a delightful approach. That's a terrific idea.
Just be careful not to, like, if you're talking to like a VP of sales or whoever, a VP, don't make him into like a technician or something. Not that there's anything.
And don't misspell his or her name. Absolutely.
Yes.
Here's one. Speaking of SkyTap and CloudShare and similar environments, I have customers who need to reserve demo environments ahead of time, and or customers who tell me it takes an hour or two to spin up a demo environment. Have you ever heard of those kinds of things happening?
Well, I have my own set of problems with hardware in terms of getting the right hardware in, but not from a virtual perspective, no. So
this depended on companies and software and culture, but it's just something else to be aware of. If you need to reserve a demo environment for some reason in advance, make sure you've got it and make sure you blocked it out early enough that you can get into it, test it, make sure everything's working, that somebody hasn't, what's the technical term, screwed it up for you.
Yes, that is the technical term, yes.
That is a technical term. Make sure you have it, that it's going to be accessible to you long enough. I actually have seen a demo where somebody reserved it, but for whatever reason, there was like a 2-hour limit on the use of that environment. And we're in the middle of this, literally in the middle of the demo, and it just shuts down. And the pre-sales guy, it was an SC, a sales engineer, was unable to re-access that environment because it had been taken down. The good news, it was automatically taken down. The bad news was it was automatically taken down.
Yes. Well, we have similar issues where people can log into our device and do things like reboot the router or reboot the chassis that we're using. So we're very cognizant of community. There is no way to stop that, like through admin work, but we're very cognizant in sending an email to the team, like, "Hey, don't do anything. I'm using it."
Don't use. Yep.
Yeah.
So these are all part of the checklist, if you will. If you need to have access and there's any issues, make sure that you've got it blocked out so that you don't have a nasty surprise before, during, or potentially after an important demo, or any demo for that matter.
Oh, I have one more thing to add. So I don't know, different companies behave differently, but some companies send updates to our PCs, whether we like it or not, and then force us to reboot in a very short period of time. So if that happens to you, I don't know if there's a right answer, but I prefer to upgrade before going into a demo, just so that it doesn't upgrade in the middle of a demo.
Are you Windows or Mac?
I am Windows.
You're Windows. So you sound like you're referring to those extraordinarily frustrating instances where your Windows machine has decided on its own that it's going to be updating environment, and there's not a darn thing you can do about it. Is that correct?
I wish it was Windows. It's my company that does it.
Oh, it's your company that does it.
It's our IT.
Oh boy.
It says, there's some vulnerabilities. Here you go. Reboot in 15 minutes. Like, no, I'm doing a demo.
And it doesn't allow you to do anything but just drives a reboot, right?
Yeah, so you can postpone it for a couple hours. Just and at some point, I think you can't postpone anymore. So just make sure that's not during the demo.
So there's a term for the teams that do that to you. They're called the sales prevention team.
Okay. Nice.
I have, through my career, I have gone back and forth from Windows to Mac, Windows to Mac, Windows to Mac, and I'm currently on Mac because of exactly what we just talked about, where Windows was driving, without my permission or agreement, updating and rebooting of my laptop. And in fact, the crowning experience was driving. I have to visualize this. I'm packing up my laptop or trying to pack up my laptop to drive to a workshop that I was delivering fairly locally. I was driving to it. And just before I was about to pack up, shut down my machine and pack up, it starts to do the Windows update. And it says, of course, do not unplug, do not turn off, or you will suffer, the
consequences.
The consequences of Windows. And so what am I doing? You have to visualize, I'm now driving down the freeway, 280 in the San Francisco Bay Area, with my laptop on the passenger seat, open, still going through its updates, and it's at 30%, 5 minutes later, 31%. And then finally, I'm sitting in the parking lot at my customer, still waiting for the stupid thing to finish up. That was, for me, the final straw, and as a result, I now have a Macintosh sitting on my desktop. But this is just a general issue. Macintoshes also have their own issues with updates and so forth. Got to have as much as you can under your control.
Yeah. My colleague upgraded his laptop. Everything went fine until he had a demo, and he got the blue screen of death.
Oh, no.
Just because of the
upgrade. One additional, and pardon the pun, small thing to contemplate, and that's your mouse cursor and cursor size. Have you ever been on the receiving end of a web demo where you could barely see the mouse?
I haven't, but I remember doing that to you when I was doing the demo first time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think, didn't I make the comment that it wouldn't be a bad idea to increase your cursor size?
Yes, I believe so.
So this is another, if you will, checklist item. High-res machines that are presenting over the web often have, very, very tiny-looking cursors, and in many cases, the cursors aren't even filled in. They're just an outline, and so it's worth a check to see what does your cursor look like on whatever screen you're connecting to, whether it's over the web or face-to-face, And you may want to contemplate going to the control panel in Windows or preferences on Mac and changing your cursor from whatever the default is to something that's reasonably viewable and perhaps a little bit or even moderately larger. Because let's face it, if you're going to spend an hour or 2 hours and ask the customer to follow your mouse cursor around, make it as easy as possible. Oh, do not turn it, however, into the old dinosaur. Do you remember that? That rap,
Yes.
rap, rap.
That will grow old pretty fast. Do you have like any recommendations of like the size, or is it different for every computer who's seeing it?
Well, so it's probably going to be different for most. Well, I mean, it'll be ranges. Microsoft years ago did a study of mouse cursors, and they found that at the time, if I recall correctly, the most visible cursor, most easy to see, non-annoying cursor was something they called Bronze 3D. I don't know if that's still available in the standard Windows environment, but I believe it is available as an add-on of some kind. So you might even just check into that. Frankly, the best thing to do is just explore, see what various cursors and cursor sizes and fill-ins and non-fill-ins look like, and get some feedback and make those changes.
Sounds like a plan. All right.
So that's physical environment. That's the software environment. We've got a couple minutes. You want to talk very, very briefly about the human environment and human factors?
Sure. Yeah. Let's do it.
Have you ever given a demo or been on the receiving end of a demo from somebody who was obviously not at the peak of their health?
Yeah, all the time.
All the time. And what happened?
Not really sure. I didn't pay attention to that, to be honest.
Well, maybe there's the answer right there. If you weren't paying attention, then it wasn't effective. Where I'm going to this is to simply be honest with oneself. There are times where we are not at our best, and we may need to make a decision to either reschedule a demo meeting or ask someone else to deliver it if that's an option. Private pilots have an acronym which I think is a really good example. It's I'm safe. IMSAFE, and it stands for illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotion. And all it's really saying is, are you in a physiological state where you can really do a good job, an acceptable job, delivering this demo? Because if you're not, you may want to contemplate rescheduling, as I said, or asking somebody else to do it. It's just if you will, a self-assessment.
No, I misunderstood your question. Then I thought of like someone overweight. That's what I thought you meant by peak of their health. So I didn't notice anything different. That's what I meant.
I see what you mean. Yeah. No, that should in theory be independent, but no, I'm talking about situations where, gee, is it possible that you went to a trade show and the night before booth duty, you and the rest of the team were out in New Orleans till 3 a.m.? Well, those next demos at 8:30 a.m. probably are going to suffer as a result of that. There are other issues here involved, but let's face it. If you need to be, let me rephrase, you need to be crisp, you need to be clear, you need to be in good shape when you're communicating with customers if you expect a happy result.
I agree.
And that actually suggests an acronym. And for great demo, we just came up with this, CRISP, C-R-I-S-P, and it stands for C is confirm plan with the customer, R is, are your roles clear, the roles clear, I stands for illustrations, that's a great demo element, are the illustrations ready, S stands for situation slide, and that's, are your situation slides complete, another great demo element, and the P is have you practiced this, so you're really ready to go. So CRISP is a very nice acronym for great demo practitioners, and actually at a recent workshop, somebody suggested that maybe an even better acronym is D-CRISP, so D-CRISP, where the D stands for discovery. Has sufficient discovery been done? So that's just a quick note about human factors. So we've talked now about physical environment, we've talked about the software environment, we touched briefly on human factors. Anything else?
Well, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So as a sales engineer, you're not generally the leader of your sales team. It's usually the salesperson. Am I correct in my assumption so far?
Absolutely. It's a team sport, but the account manager typically takes the lead.
Yeah, he's the
Yep.
captain.
Yep.
So how do you deal with an account manager who sits and works on his own thing in the middle of your demo? Is that acceptable to begin with?
I would consider that to be grounds for firing.
Okay.
That is unacceptable. In the bad old days, you used to see account managers in the back of the room tapping away on their BlackBerries. People that worked for me that showed those kinds of behaviors didn't last long. Your account manager, the salesperson, should be an active participant. They need to be paying attention. They need to be making notes on what questions they were asked. One of the ways to solve that problem, are you interested?
Yes, please.
Is to have your salesperson realize that part of their role is to do a final summary. And a final summary in a demo includes an overview of what was accomplished in the demo at a very high level, and a review of the questions and key issues that were raised by the customer and addressed. It includes the list of any items that were parked or deferred until later that need to be addressed. And it should include a discussion of the logical next steps. And so in order to do that, an account manager or salesperson needs to be paying active attention and participating as an active team member in that demo. Yeah, end of story.
To be clear, it's not my current sales guy. It's a former sales guy of mine. But the way I tried to solve it, which then backfired, was to ask him to take the notes for me so that I can actually focus on doing the demo. Like,
What happened?
What happened, and he'd be working, and then they'd ask a question, and then I'd have to tell him, "Hey, guy, can you write that down?" And it'll be very obvious that he's nowhere in the room. So
the end result for that should be attrition.
well, we worked it out. We worked it out later. Like he was a good guy. He had many other good qualities, but that one pissed me off. And I think I'm good at communicating when I'm pissed off to people. I'm 6'2", 280 pounds, so people can tell.
You're the SE with presence.
Yes, maybe a little bit too much presence right now, but working on it.
Fully understood. Cool. Anything else?
No, I think this was great. Thank you for wanting to do this. I appreciate it.
That was my pleasure. I hope people find this useful, and in particular, if anybody has any suggestions or observations on some of the things we talked about in this session, and in particular, any experiences they'd like to share with respect to CloudShare or SkyTap or any other tools that they use to keep their environments up and spick and span and pristine, please let us know. You can reach me at pcohan@secondderivative.com or through our website at greatdemo.com. And Ramsey, how do they reach you?
Ramsey at wethesalesengineers.com.
There you go.
Do you have a few more minutes? I know it's past our time, so it's okay if you have to go, but I have a couple of questions about the training that you do.
Sure, I'm all yours.
Yeah, so do you do these trainings, do you work with companies specifically, or can individuals come and take your training if they so wish to?
So it's both. The majority of the workshops that we do are company specific. So for one particular organization, they gather together a team of a dozen or so pre-sales folks, or a combination of sales and pre-sales folks, which is actually often the best case. Those are company specific workshops, and we also offer public open workshops, which are open to all comers. And the idea is exactly what you're just saying, so that individuals or small groups could get exposed and learn the methodology. In many occasions, it's customers who are already great demo practitioners who have new hires or transfers. They'll send folks to a public workshop. And actually, since you asked that, I get to do a plug, and that is for our next public workshop that I'm delivering will take place in the San Francisco Bay Area by the airport, SFO, on October 2 and 3. So if you're interested in that, happy to see you aboard, or let me know if you have questions.
And they should reach out to you to pcohen@secondderivative.com, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Awesome. Yeah, good. I was hoping you'd plug it because I was curious. All right. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for your time, Pete. And if there's anything I can do for you as well, please let me know.
Just continue to be a terrific sales engineer.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Cheers. Have a good
Cheers.
one.
You too. Bye. Have you guys heard of the Jim Rohn saying that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with? Well, I want Peter to be one of my 5. He doesn't know that, but if you're listening, Peter, I want you as one of my 5. And for that, you have an open invitation to be on this show anytime you want, as many times as you want, until you basically get bored of my questions, which happens, I've been told. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for listening. Peter mentioned that he has his individual great demo workshop on October 2nd and 3rd. If you're interested in going and happen to be listening before then, and it's not full yet, these are way too many conditions, but if all these conditions are satisfied, Peter has offered 10% off for the individuals. All you have to do is email Peter saying that Ramsey sent me. Not Ramsey referred me or heard about you from We the SEs. We basically want to make sure that you heard it on the show and you specifically say, Ramsey sent me. Now, if you're smart enough to tell other people to say those exact words, by all means do that. Refer them to the show as well. So that's it. I'm not affiliated with Peter, but I really want to go to one of his workshops. I've heard great things about it from my colleagues. If you ever listen to the show called Nerd Journey, John White, one of the hosts there, always talks about Peter's courses. So check it out. And I'll have a link to the Eventbrite page on the show notes, or in the show notes, which is at wetheSalesEngineers.com/show68. Again, thank you guys for listening. Way too many calls to actions today, but check out Career Builder. So wetheSalesEngineers.com/career-builder. There will be a link in the show notes. And I will see you guys next time.